Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Valor SHL podcast, or ValSHL for short. I am your host, ValorX77. It's just going to be me this week. Although technically this is episode 2, the first episode is the mock draft that I've done. So let's get into today's podcast about the SHL. So let me give you some context to where we are in the season. So we just completed the first round of the playoffs in the J and in the SHL. So both teams are in the second round. The SHL just finished up the stream of games 1 and 2 of the first games of the second round. We'll take a look at update on our standings later. But first, I want to take a look here at some of the races here in the SHL to see who came out on top and who I think is the favorite to win certain awards. So we obviously have to start with our skater standings here. Max Carnage has just broken the 60-goal plateau, finishing with 62 on the season. Very impressive for him. Beating out Lakemore's 58, Sopranos 57, Hargreaves 52, Valentine's 51, Purbich 51, Derek Martin 40, and so on. Carnage also led the league in points. Wallace was third in assists. His teammate, Johnny Wagner Severson, had 77 assists and overall led the league. Carnage, well, it's going to be a tough debate between Carnage or Wagner Severson to see who ends up winning the Summer Con and also the award? And the Raw Mexico, which is our league's MVP. The Summer Con is basically the MVP voted by the users of the league. And the Raw Mexico is the committee voted one, for those who don't know. As you can tell, let's see here, we got that. Nabe Dabson is the winner of the Turd Ferguson Award for most penalty minutes. In fact, also big shout out here to Chris Valentine. He managed to be second in penalty minutes, but also leading Texas in points. It's rare that you see a goon player like him lead a team in points. Texas is also quite good this season. Hodor led in shots blocked by a mile. He's probably heading towards a Bojo Biscuit award. At this point, so let's see if that holds up. PowerPoint goals, Lakemore the second. Surprisingly, Valentine, also a very good player too, but also high penalty minutes. Let's take a look at the goalie stats. To no one's surprise, Justin Time was the overall winner with 44 wins. But let's see, does the rest of his stats hold up? Starter-wise, he is actually second among starters in goals against average. GB of LA has 2.82 goals against average. I think GB actually ends up winning the John McBride Award. Higher goals save above average, higher goals against average. Save percentage, let's see what we have here. Yeah, much better. .910 save percentage. Something tells me that GB is definitely, in my opinion, the winner of the McBride. Wins is definitely not something that I count as a good stat. So let's see. We're only a couple minutes in because I'm only starting this pod. So let's take a look at our playoffs right now. I'll discuss what happened. They did not update the index yet, despite it being ran. So by the time this is up, the index will most likely be updated. Yeah, I get pings all the time, so if that showed up, don't be surprised. Not showing the whole screen. So, to no one's surprise, Texas managed. So there were only 2 sweeps in the first round in the West. LA took care of Seattle 4-0, and Texas took care of Winnipeg. The closest, New Orleans got revenge from losing in 7 to Minnesota from last season. They beat them in 5, setting up a matchup with Texas. And for the yesenth year, I invented a word, yesenth year in a row, LA San Francisco in the second round, the Battle of California. But Calgary gave San Francisco a run for their money, pushing the series to 6. Heck, the series was even tied after 4 games. Over on the east side, we have a few upsets to note. Buffalo has upset Toronto in 7 games. And probably the biggest upset of the playoffs, the division-winning New England Wolfpack and the defending Cup champions are out in the first round. They were down 3-1, came back to force a Game 7, but lost it in a high-scoring affair as Baltimore finally wins a playoff series for the first time since the Eastern Conference Final 2 seasons ago. They get a matchup versus Buffalo. Tampa at one point was actually running into trouble with Hamilton, who was by far the worst team in the conference. They pushed them to 6, but Tampa still ended up winning. In other words, we have another upset in the East as Atlanta beats Philly 4-2 and sets up a matchup with Tampa. Let's see here. Something tells me whoever comes out of that Tampa-Atlanta matchup is going to go to the finals. It's probably going to be like Tampa versus LA or San Francisco. I hate to discount Texas, despite me being a former player there for a couple of seasons, but I just feel like that Texas has not had a real challenge yet. No, I think Texas will beat NOLA, but I think it's going to be like in 6 games. LA San Francisco should go 7. These two teams are pretty much evenly matched on paper. So let's take a look at the J side of things. So, we're waiting for it to load. Most of the top points leaders came from Maine. McZerl led goals, but Doug Way was your overall points leader. Yeah, the top 10 of plus minus is all Maine players. Maine pretty much won the President's Trophy by a landslide, and is probably just gonna end up taking it. So now let's look at the J standings coming into this. As you can see, Maine won by a pretty comfortable margin of 23 points. That's an 11.5 game lead. And Rich barely held off there. But the way seeding goes is by conference. They finally turn the divisions into conferences. So you got it's like the old 1 through 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. And this playoffs, oh boy, was this hectic. So let's take a look. Let me pull up the standings in another tab. Over here, set it by conference. We did have a few upsets to note here. First things first, Ottawa, the 6th seed, knocked off 3rd seed at 6. But remember, Ottawa made a surprising run to the 4-Star Cup final last season before bowing out to Vancouver. Next, we had, and note they do reseed after the thing. Another thing to note: Colorado outlasted Carolina in 7. If you don't know, yes, Carolina pushed. We had another push the 2 seed to a Game 7. Detroit, who is the 4 seed, swept St. Louis. And then finally, Maine took easy coverage of San Diego in 5. Over in the Southern Conference, in the Northern Conference, a lot of upsets. First, the 3rd seed Yukon Malamutes No, not really an upset. UConn outlasted UConn beat Newfoundland in 6. The 4-5 matchup between the Great Falls Grizzlies and Vancouver Whalers went to 7, won by Great Falls. Therefore, we will have a new champion. We have Kelowna. Okay, the 2 seed taking quick care of Quebec in 6. And probably the biggest upset of the playoffs so far. The top seed in the North is out in the first round and swept. Let's see. They had by far the second best goal differential, and they got beaten by the team who had the league's second worst goal differential and second worst record by points. Swept by the Thunder, what will go down as one of the greatest upsets in the J playoff history. Which, to think of it, you do not see that happen in the SHL. Because if that happens, those GMs are going to get salty quickly and ask for a resim. Okay, let's go back to the main SHL because there's another topic I want to discuss. The draft. Yep, with draft season around the corner, the tank standings have been settled. As you can tell here, the final standings seen below, the team with the worst record is not guaranteed the first overall pick. How we do things here, instead of a draft lottery, which to stop teams from tanking, it's decided on whoever gets the most points after they're eliminated from playoff contention. And the team that got the most points was Montreal. And you would think they got the first overall pick. Surprise, that's not their pick. They traded it. It's Minnesota who drafts number 1. Second overall is Chicago, followed by Montreal, who owns Edmonton's pick. So they still get third overall, pretty good. And then Manhattan. And with the eliminations occurred, here is the rest of the order. Seattle will be drafting 5th. Hamilton will be drafting 6th. Winnipeg will be drafting 7th. Edmonton will be drafting 8th. The pick was originally owned by Minnesota. Hang on one second as I'm going to go grab the updated standings I put up on the rookie chat. So let's see what I have here. Yep. Pick number 9. This was would have been Calgary's pick, but it's owned by Winnipeg, followed by Toronto, then New England, and then Philadelphia. Philadelphia is sitting at 12th overall. So those are the picks that are locked in for now. The remaining 6 picks by team rec standings is the following: Buffalo, New Orleans, Baltimore, whose pick is owned by Winnipeg, Atlanta, Tampa, Texas, whose pick is owned by Minnesota, San Francisco, whose pick is owned by Edmonton, and LA, whose pick is owned by Minnesota. So Minnesota has probably the biggest leverage in the draft. They have a pretty big prospect pool right now. So I could see them, in theory, if their prospects aren't developing, they could trade some of those prospects away for picks, more picks, and get better prospects. But you've got to remember, the cap is pretty tight, and spots in the SHL are very limited, so you've got to be careful. I don't know what the update is for the J side, but they still have a draft lottery. The way it works is that only one team gets first overall, and the order gets decided after whoever gets first. Meaning, if the team with the worst odds ends up winning, everybody moves down one slot, who gets eliminated in the playoffs. So right now, the team with the best odds is San Diego. So let's see how we're here. We're about 14 minutes into this podcast. I don't want to jump into questions yet. Let's go and talk about another topic. We're going to go to the SHL website for this one. This is going to be today's hot topic in the SHL. We have news coming out of there about a federation change in the IHF. If you don't know, the IHF is our off-season tournament alongside the World Junior Classic for J players. The big announcement coming here. Is there a lot of? There's a lot of guests. Comes from the announcement that there would be a new team taking over. The new IHF Federation. You could see the thing is it was Russia, but then the whole Ukraine war happened. And as a result, they decided to change it to being an independent Russia. But then the Federation was being poorly ran because nobody wants to play for a country that would play for human rights violations. They had a bunch of shortlisted nations, but the nation they decided to go on, oh boy, was quite a controversial call. They decided to go with Quebec as the new federation. And oh boy, was a lot of Team Canada pissed. Because one, that's technically two nations playing. Quebec is not really a real country. They're part of Canada. And two, this team will likely lose players to Quebec as a result. And many Canadian players have all decided that they were just going to stay put and not move. So, yeah. So that's the big controversy coming into this season. The formation of Quebec replacing Russia, and the whole Canada being divided thing. But most of the team is staying loyal. And we all agree. My player, Nanashi Mume, is on Team Canada, and they are not because they are from Ottawa. I set them in, even though they're Inuit. They are staying loyal to Canada and not jumping ship to Quebec. Because, in my opinion, it's your call if you're going to make the jump. But if you do, you are technically a traitor by default. And as a result, you essentially have a high risk of potentially blackballing yourself from Canada. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the most recent media. The big topics. We have a couple retirements to note. With Dogwood Maple and Yosh hanging him up. Yosh is in the F79 class. We also have updates from reviews from Calgary, which I used to do, but I would rather not talk about them because it was kind of dictated by Izzy as spreading propaganda. But it seems that this person's doing it on accord and it's not force-fed by their GM, which is good. Boom's a good person. She wouldn't do that. And then we have Seven's Free Stars of the Week series, which will likely lead to a revival of Hockey Talk tonight as something new. There's a new format that he's working on. Let's talk about the J media. The big story coming out of the J is the underdog story of the Thunder Bay Walleye. You can pretty much see what we have here, written by some of the rookies, but this one was written by Tip Toasty here, the big media of the day. Crazy enough, mainly been dominated by Walleye's goalie, who had that series. The main story is their goalie. A 1.88 goals against the average and a 937 save percentage. That guy shut down one of the deadly offenses in the J. However, the team made several changes, bringing up guys like bringing 3 rookies, being Puddles Duck, Teddy Blues, and Tip Toasty. If you don't know, Tip Toasty is he in this class? Let me go pull up the. Let's see. I'm pretty sure he's in this class. So he was taken in the J draft, 42nd overall by Thunder Bay. So this was an all-rookie first line that got most of the scoring done. And not to mention, O'Duckling and Blues are 2 recreates in this draft. This is Z-Wiz and Bluespan, 2 longtime users in the league. Both of these players will likely go high when the draft comes around. So we'll see what happens. Most people congratulating the upset and the GM. Oh, Blues is actually Yosh, who is their GM. But I do expect them to go, huh? Okay. So, last week, I ended up making a... Hang on one second. I gotta stop this for a moment because my dog starts barking and that's not good. Okay, I'm back. So I had to interrupt the podcast because my mic's so sensitive, so it picks up the dog barks. Okay. So do we go into questions right now? I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to jump into some questions. Ooh, So, first question comes from one of the biggest firsts in this draft. This is from Rengoku. He says, they ask, from your perspective, what are the comparative values between first gens and recreates in the SHL draft? Now, this is one of the biggest questions that comes to mind when you're making a mock draft. Obviously, some of the first bigger players will have pipelines to other teams. Obligatory plug for my media. So, personally, from what I can tell is certain GMs will value first gens more. They want to take a chance at someone they want to develop into someone that would become one of the biggest people in the league, like a future HL member or even a future GM, and claim that they created this person. Another thing to note with the pipelines, they're more like, for example, you got teams that have, if they notice they have one player that they won the draft and they only have one pick, they will do everything in their power to try to get that player back. Unless the player specifies in, sorry if I fumble my pronunciations. I have a hard time speaking because I have autism, so yeah, you just learned something about me. I actually have high functioning autism, so. Okay, next thing here. They say, of course. Let's get. I'm losing my train of thought. This should be the. I call this episode Calm Before the Storm because the next week's storm would be two things coming up: the championships for both the Challenge Cup Finals and the 4-Star Cup Finals, which are the championships for the SHL and the SMJHL, respectively. So, with that in mind, this is just simple playoffs. On Saturday, we complete round 2 and see who will be the final 4 on both sides. So, when evaluating a first-year recreate, it really comes down to how they answer the questions to determine, do they match, or do another thing they look for is if you ask for bonus, if you ask them questions. If you ask them questions, the team will likely get engaged with you more, and your stock will probably go up. But I do know something that if you're a first gen, this could lower your stock. If you start multiple sim leagues at the same time, for example, Yeti Taz, who is I'm a newbie, is pretty much occupied with another league. For this example, I might be wrong, but this is probably going to potentially tank their stock into the draft. Or if they got punished in another league, this will probably tank their stock. Like, for example, how C9 Van is in this draft. He got in trouble for xenophobic comments in the PBE, which is an affiliate league. This will definitely hurt his stock a good bit, too, as well. Next one. This is from Slothface Killer. If I pronounced your name right, yes, I did. First question is, do you have any preferences on SHL teams? As of this moment, I have only been scouted by 2 teams right now. Minnesota, who reached out to me last week, trying to figure out who they're going to pick number 1 overall. They have spoken to all 4 top players in TPE. As of today, I am the top player in TPE-wise. So, I'm pretty sure first overall is probably going to be somebody like Waters. Although they had a good talk with me, I just do not view myself as first overall material. If I do end up going first overall and I end up being wrong, I'm going to be shocked. But in a perfect world, if I were like to, there are several teams that I have never been on or have been on that I wanted to go to. But ideally, I like to say this. It's an environment that would welcome me. It has good GMs that are willing to interact with me and address my concerns. And is able to help my player grow and help each other up. and be able to help curb my anger if I'm on a bad day. Next goal. He asks, any goals for the playoffs? I'm not sure. I already have a 4-star cut with a previous player. I mean, I wouldn't mind another one, but we'll see. I just feel happy with just one playoff series win. We were supposed to be middle of the pack, supposed to be one of the bottom feeders in the league. We turned out to be one of the better teams in the conference. We finished 4th. So we're performing at around what we expected to be. So exactly what I wanted. Next question comes from Troy McClure 03, who is once again in this draft class. Do you think there's a solid formula to make a dynasty, or it's all magic beans? Well, to me, it's partially skill, one half luck. First, you're going to need the skill to have a good draft record. You got to make sure which users you're able to develop said user, keep them engaged as long as they can, and then get a couple free creates to help build up the mentorship there, to help build up the first gen, so eventually succeed them. And the second part is luck. Back in the day, test simming was allowed. However, around the late S60s, it soon became clear that certain teams seemed to know the sim a little bit better than others, putting those teams at a heavy disadvantage. So what did HO decide to do? They decided to ban test simming. And you do not want to get caught by this. Doing so is essentially getting a death penalty. Not quite a permanent ban, but it's a bad one. A 5-season ban, essentially forcing your player to retire. They take either $20 million or half your money. And it's unappealable. Next question is, how many 3-ounce cheeseburgers can you eat at one time? With 30 minutes, only soda to drink, bottom buns only. Ooh. These questions usually get me to think all the time. But in my opinion, probably 1 or 2 at a time, because I'm trying to lose weight, because I'm pre-diabetic, almost full diabetic. So in my opinion, I think 1 or 2. Just to be plain and simple with you. Next question's from another first in this draft. Is called from Finn Gofflin and Ringle. They ask, what's your favorite thing about the SHL? Finding your stride in the league. For example, I was able to find graphics as my stride. Like, I do a lot of the draft graphics you'll see in the draft in 2 weeks. So, I think, in my opinion, graphics, the way the bank system works, it's completely automated. So no need to. We still have people that run the system, but it's just to make sure that nothing goes horribly wrong. They've been asked, what are some of your favorite all-time players in the SHL? Let's be honest, I don't have any favorites. Because really, I only focus on my own player. Occasionally teammates in case of, like, if I need to write team media or something, or team graphics. It just really depends on the situation. So, yeah, I'm trying to be more of a team person recently, but I can be selfish at times. So I don't have any favorites. I don't like picking favorites. Then we have Gaby D, another first gen, asking, what is your favorite team in both leagues? Team logo wise, or let's see. I'm pretty sure some of my favorite branding in the SHL. I really like the pink color the pink and teal coloring of Tampa. I really like LA's branding too. It's quite simple. The logo's not quite as complex as the first one was, so pretty simple. Winnipeg Aurora is another team. They were originally called the Winnipeg Jets for a long time. No, the real NHL did not send us a cease and desist letter. They just rebranded out of just sheer boredom, apparently. So I don't know the whole process. In the J, Vancouver Whalers were one of my favorites. I do have a soft spot because I won a championship with them. Newfoundland Berserkers is a good one. The Citadels is another brand I like. I'm not a fan of Yukon's branding, though. It just feels bland, and the logo just looks. It looks like the pet is traumatized. It's like it's traumatized. It's just got its head decapitated, and you put it on a logo, and you put it on a jersey. That's just sad. I just don't know what to think of it. And the final question is coming from JMS. Who should I want my player drafted by in the SHL draft? It really depends. I would do your research on the teams and the users, and then ask other users to see like what advice they have. Since you're a first gen, I think it's better for you to learn the ropes and then have a random team pick. But if it doesn't work out for your first few seasons, there's always free agency. But my tip is with that, be as transparent as possible with management to ensure that you have the smoothest transition in free agency and to make sure that it's probably better to just, if you get signed and traded, the better off you are because it benefits you and it benefits the team that you're leaving. It's a win-win situation. They get some picks off of you, so it works out. So I'd say just go with the flow, and whoever drafts you, don't throw a fit if it's the team you. Let's. I have seen it's very rare that this happens. That it's a team that you tell do not draft, and then they take them anyway, which is kind of a dick move, to be honest with. It makes two players look like dicks. One, for that player for not wanting to play, and then two, the team did it on purpose so they can hold you hostage for draft picks. But then, of course, you could, of course, be the team that does not offer a contract because what happens is basically the same thing as going undrafted. You have to wait a whole season to get picked again, which I think is rough and terrible. I mean, I had to go for this my first time around, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, I think that I'm just going to wrap up the podcast here. I just had to say what I had to say, make it nice, short, and sweet. Thank you guys for listening into today's podcast. I will be back next week with another podcast updating towards the Challenge Cup and the 4-Star Cup, and more predictions about who goes where in the draft. I'll take a look at my old mock from episode 1, and we'll see what happens there. Anyway, thank you guys. Take care of yourselves, and have a great rest of your day or night.